Yep, you sound great, Lou.
Okay, well, it's the first time that's happened, but I appreciate it. Okay, so let me share the results of the poll. Which of the hiring challenges are you facing? 3/4 of the group here facing not seeing enough strong candidates, half not seeing enough passive candidates, half losing people because their comp is off, and another third or so have hiring manager issues. So what we're going to do today is we'll address all of those issues. Let's just kind of make it, we'll do it within less than an hour, but we'll certainly cover all of those issues. So, and if you have any specific hiring challenges, put them in the chat area. My most significant hiring challenge is, finish that sentence and put it in the chat, and I'll see if during the course of this, if I see it there, I'll pull something in to kind of give you a tip before we get into here. Again, JJ pointed out that there is a handout. The handout is right here. You can either copy it or JJ in the chat area put in the URL where you can clearly get to it. So you can copy this. You got to type it in separately, or you can just click on the URL that JJ put in the chat. It's a little bit above where we are here. So let's kind of begin. Let's kind of take a look at this. Was there a statement you wanted to make, JJ, or did I get that?
Nope, you're great. I just wanted to make sure you hit the poll results, but you just did, okay. So we're good to go.
I had a feeling that's what that meant, but couldn't be positive. Okay, so I want to kind of just make the statement here. What I want to do today is probably three things. Number one, introduce this group to performance-based hiring as a concept. That's what my company does. We train people around the world using performance-based hiring. I'm going to contend that using it is relatively inexpensive. It's insignificant in terms of additional cost, but the impact is huge in terms of raising the talent level. So that would be the second component I want to kind of get at is what is performance-based hiring, how can it raise the talent level, and then calculate it and demonstrate what the ROI of doing those things are. So that's what we're going to do. And this is a lead-up to some degree to what I'm going to be talking about at LinkedIn's Talent Connect in San Francisco next month, in a couple of weeks, and in November in London. Not exactly, but the point is of how do you measure quality of hiring, how do you raise it. So I'm going to start by making the contention, if you take your whole workforce, entire company workforce, and break it into three groups, the bottom third, the middle third, and the top third, I make the contention that most companies really what they're all really doing is hiring people just like they've always hired, and the focus, the strategy is let's do it at the lowest cost and do it more efficiently. HCSs are designed that way. We want people with all the same skills that we've always hired. We want people with all who fit within our compensation range. So really what we do is we try to clone our existing workforce more efficiently. Sometimes we get out of control and we do some high volume hiring, or we make mistakes at the interviewing level, or whatever it is. We sometimes make interviewing mistakes or hiring mistakes for the wrong reasons, so we tend to hire people that we shouldn't have hired. To hire the top third requires something totally different. I make the contention, though, and I think most of our clients, we look at it when we do an audit, we realize that their emphasis is on efficiency and avoiding mistakes. So they really, but hiring the top third it's luck if they get somebody in the top third. It's not a pattern. Well, I'm going to suggest that you can make it not luck. You can actually focus and target on hiring the top third. It requires to broaden whom you're going to source, the total market, not just people who apply. You got to get not hire people who meet this restricted set of filters, and you're not going to try to hire people quickly. But there are ways to do it. That's what I want to talk about today, and that's what performance-based hiring is about, and are ways that we can demonstrate and prove it. The idea is that performance-based hiring is a hiring process to hire the top third. It requires people to do totally different kinds of things. You can't just do the same stuff more efficiently. You got to do different stuff more efficiently. But I got to prove that, so that's what I'd like to do today, and then also demonstrate the ROI. So I'm going to introduce you in 2 minutes to the methodology. We're going to do the ROI. Then I'm going to go through the methodology of how we capture the data, and then at the end, if anybody wants to hang on, we can kind of do it for your company and share the slide. But when you really think about it, if you could get the data, what's the variable profit contribution for each dollar of compensation? Well, it turns out that it's about $1 to $4. So if you're paying $2 for a $100,000 person, on average that person should bring in more than $200,000 in variable profit. And then you can figure out, okay, what's it cost to do that and to get a better person? So this is public information. Everyone, if you're a public company, you have to report revenue for employees. Cisco is 630, Apple's 2.2 million per individual, GE 477,000 per person. The variable profit, again, you can extract it from the data, but it's roughly 30 to 40% at most companies. So if you say 35%, the LinkedIn average is 600,000 per employee. Public information as well as the average compensation for employee. I'm not going to go through the mathematics right now, but by dividing total variable profit by total compensation, you can actually get a figure on average. It says, on average, each employee should generate, for each dollar you spend on employee salaries, that person should generate $2.50 in profit. We'll get into this later if anybody wants to get into it, but suffice it to say that's public information, and it's nothing to do with assumptions. That's public information. But now consider this, and you guys might want to put this in the chat area. How many people are you going to be hiring? Is your company going to be hiring over the next 12 months? Just put the number of people in there, and you'll see how this lays out. So put in number of people you got. So we got 200. Carol's doing a couple hundred. Joanna 6, small company. Lori 15. If you're a search firm, you're obviously going to be doing. You're a big company. So I'm working with a couple big companies that are hiring hundreds, if not thousands. Well, let's assume your company, just for the sake of argument, you're hiring 100 people over the next 12 months. 800 is obviously a big company. If you're going to pay each of those people on average $100,000, 100 times 100,000 is $10 million in additional salary for 100 people. If the average is $2.50, that group should bring in $25 million in profit per year if you hire people just like you've already hired. The top third, interestingly enough, to get to the top third, they just have to be 15 to 20% better. That if you get someone who's 15 to 20% better, 100 people, that's going to generate approximately $4 million in profit per year. This is the gift the top third keeps on giving. I mean, you could say it's forever if you always hire the top third, but if you just say 4 years, the top third will generate, for 100 people, $16 million extra variable profit if you can hire the top third. Now the question in the ROI is, what does it cost to hire the top third and get this 16 extra million? I'm going to contend for 100 people, you have to probably have a few extra recruiters, and you probably have to do a different system, but it's probably a couple $100,000 at most, maybe $500,000 at most to hire 100 people to the top third. That's an ROI decision. Now, I'm going to go through the steps to prove that and then offer anybody who wants to be part of a proof of concept. This is the same proof I'm going to be offering at LinkedIn Talent Connect. We already got a dozen people in it. But if you're interested, we can talk about it. But let's now put this aside for a moment, and I want to go through the process. To hire the top third, you have to do some different things. First off, you have to have a different strategy. It's got to be attracting people, not weeding out people. Number two, you have to have a different process on how the best people look for work. Number three, you got to shift your sourcing mix. You just can't advertise. You got to look for more passive candidates. Also, you can't offer lateral transfers. You got to offer real careers. You also have to have a true partnership with the recruiter and the hiring manager. I mean, there's things you have to do. And you have to integrate your hiring, your sourcing, your interviewing, all that stuff has to be thought out strategically. That's what performance-based hiring does. It ties all of these pieces together. You got to, if you want to hire the top third wants more money. Now, you don't have enough money. The top third, probably because of the top third, they probably have less experience. Well, you can't have more experience and expect to pay people with more experience in the top third less money. So you either got to raise the bridge or lower the water, but you got to do some different things. So while the ROI of doing that is significant, you got to kind of think totally differently to pull it off. So let me just kind of start, and feel free to ask questions here. Let me start by saying you have to have a different strategy. So let me ask you, for the people you're going to be hiring, whether it's half a dozen or 800 or 1,000, I'm working with companies that are hiring thousands of people. For those people you're going to be hiring, the critical positions, is there a surplus of those people, meaning, hey, let's just post an ad and we get plenty of good people to choose from, or is there a scarcity where it's real hard to find them? So just put the word scarcity or surplus. So everybody should do it. So we got 2 people doing it. This is also makes, and let me also state that there's another purpose for me going through asking the questions and the polls. You're also experiencing how we actually do our online performance-based hiring workshop. So to some degree, this is an infomercial, but I don't really say a lot about that. This is how we do training. We have verbal, we have video, we have polls, so we really try to keep it interactive. But I want to obviously give you guys an introduction of performance-based hiring. Hopefully everybody attends either a hiring manager course or a recruiter course. But I want to give you, hey, what is performance-based hiring all about? Well, the first thing is different. It's think about this from a strategy standpoint. There are 4 big steps in hiring anybody. And they generally focus on these big buckets. What do you have? What do you want in your job descriptions? What does a candidate have? It's the past. That's it. We need someone who's got all these skills, and we try to mix and match resumes against that. That's the past. When you finally talk to a candidate on the phone, you got a few people. Most recruiters box check their skills, and then the candidate says, what do I get? And you're going to say, what do I give? And the candidates generally say, well, I'm not going to be interested unless the salary's right, the comp's right, the location's right, the salary, the job title, the company, and the location. So there's a lot of negotiation that goes on at the first 5 or 10 minutes just to see if there's a rough fit. However, if you get past the having and getting filter, the best people who don't have an economic need to apply, if you have an economic need to apply, your decision criteria is, okay, I got to get back into payroll. If you already have a job or choices is, hey, which is the best job, which is the best career. So the emphasis for generally the top third is not about as long as the job makes sense, what they're going to be doing and what they could become, which is a career move, and as long as the job itself, the work, the team, the people, the culture, and what they could become is great, compensation is not unimportant, but it's less important than it is when they don't know anything. But most companies have, and you look at your ATS system, you look at your hiring process and just see the sequence of it. When you take a rec, what does the candidate need to have? You put a bunch of skills down. Then you put a posting with all those skills, and you then negotiate what people get. Eventually, after an interview or two, if the candidate's discriminating, the decision they make the job is what they do and become. But it's pretty awkward. We filter out a lot of good people who actually do the work for less money, but we never get the chance. However, that's a surplus strategy. It's what's designed into your ATS. It will not work if to hire the top third. It will work to minimize mistakes and hire people just like you've always hired more efficiently, but it will not raise your talent bar. So you got to throw that surplus strategy out, and you got to think scarcity. A scarcity process focuses on what people need to do. So I ask the hiring managers, don't tell me what the person needs to have, tell me what the person needs to do, and what could that person do if he or she is successful doing that work. Because I, as a recruiter, have to go out into the marketplace and advertise what you can do and become, and tell candidates, hey, it doesn't really matter what you get if the job isn't right. There's a lot of stuff that has to be pulled off, and a recruiter has to pull it off. That's what performance-based hiring is about. It's a scarcity strategy. The key is I got to get hiring managers to think what they can do and become, and I got to get candidates to think do and become, not get it. Yes, the drive's a little bit more, but it's a better career. Not interested. But as a recruiter, you have to hang in there. Because you're going to go after now, we're going to expand the market. We're just not going to talk to people who apply. We're going to go to everybody who's available. But that's what we're thinking. Step one is to raise the talent bar, to hire the top third, to get an ROI greater than 1,000%. You got to have a surplus. You have to have a scarcity of strategy issue. That's what performance-based hiring is. In addition, you have to have a system. It's a scarcity system, not an individual steps. Yes, it includes sourcing. Yes, it includes interviewing. Yes, it includes defining the work. Yes, it includes recruiting, but you do all of those at the same time. You can't do them separately. Here's the thing I've known, and many of you know that I've been a recruiter for many, many years. Also have an engineering background. I was running a manufacturing company. Literally, the only reason I became a recruiter is I didn't like my boss. I was doing very well in corporate industry. I was working 80 hours a week, didn't have a family, but that's a different issue. My wife really convinced me many, many years ago, we're still married today, become a recruiter, because I was using recruiters who were very successful. But after a couple of years, I realized to hire great people, to hire the top third, and for 30 years as a recruiter, I never reduced my fees. The offset was, I'm going to hire a better person. If he isn't a better person, don't charge me anything. I'll just give you money back if this is not a top third person, which is pretty convincing. I was willing to do it because we always hired a top third. But the key was you had to do it my way. My way is we don't use job descriptions. You tell me what this person needs to do to be successful. We're going to offer that person a career move. Number two, benchmarking how the best do it. They didn't find jobs by responding to ads. A few of them did, but most of them was through a referral network. Well, if that's the case, you got to kind of develop a pretty deep network to find the top third, and you got to recruit the heck out of them. Now, the other problem I had is I had hiring managers who weren't very good at interviewing. I don't think I was a very good interviewer at the beginning either. But I realized that, hey, if I became a better interviewer than my clients, I could actually defend my candidates from managers who weren't making good decisions. That came up with the two-question performance-based interviewing process, which is now used worldwide, successfully, done legally, academically, the whole bit. And the final piece is,
I didn't get that.
wait, did I hear somebody say something to me?
There's some talking in the background, I believe.
I thought somebody asked me a question, though. Was that a question, or was that a statement?
There's talking in the background.
Okay. Thank you, JJ, for that clarification. Maybe we put mute everybody, and then if anybody wants to unmute themselves, they can. Probably a better way to do it.
I think we're good to go.
Okay. Are you recording this, JJ?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Thank you, because I want to put this out somewhere soon. Then the final piece is the best people always want more money. Well, I never had enough money to give them. But what I did give them something was better than money, was a better career. So I competed on career move versus compensation. Our recruiter boot camp goes through all of these steps. I'm going to give you the highlight of it, but we're going to raise the talent bar. We have to have a system to do it, and we have to have a different strategy. But it does require a partnership with the recruiter, the manager, and the candidate. So the recruiter is the focal point of all of this, pulling this off. But the goal is, hey, let's use performance-based hiring to raise the talent bar. And the way I do that is when I take the assignment, I do not use the traditional job description. I ask hiring managers, what would it do, what would you need this person need to do to be considered in the top third of all people doing this work? Top third salesperson, top third engineer, top third VP marketing. Doesn't matter what the job is, I want to define what success looks like in the top third. Not in terms of having the right degree or having the right experience. What does this person need to accomplish in order to be a top third person? Let me kind of give you an example. Well, let me kind of go through the sourcing piece so you see where we're going. So now we have to define the top third. We also have to target everybody. So I want to describe what I call the early bird sourcing process. This I call this chart the career zone chart, but it really represents candidates at different levels of satisfaction at different points in time in their career. The blue line is the career zone curve. When a candidate takes a job, they tend to be high growth, high impact, high satisfaction, represented by the far left on the curve. If the job doesn't change much, generally speaking, many candidates get a little bit dissatisfied and their job satisfaction declines. If it declines a lot, you can see the curve starts going downhill. When I talk to a candidate, my goal is when I get them on the phone, so if I talk to Carol, I just say, hi Carol, got your resume or whatever it is. I ask the question, how long have you been looking? And I just want to find out. So with that answer alone, I get in a discussion and position a person as, is this person super passive? I'm not looking at all, very happy, but Bill Smith suggested I give you I know Bill Smith and I'm happy to chat with you, but not the least bit interested, not looking at all. That's typical of a super passive candidate, highly satisfied, highly motivated. On the other hand, Carol might say, well, I'm not looking at all, but I'm open to explore a situation if it was better than what I've got today, but I'm not looking at all. That's what we call zone 2. Person's open to look, but not for specific reasons. If Carol says, I'm thinking of looking, I've talked to a few friends, she's very narrow, at least her mind says, hey, I'm thinking of looking, she's a tiptoer, just tiptoeing into the market, or hey, I've been looking for 3 weeks. Whatever it is, I position candidates that way. Now, just to give you a sense, we've done surveys with LinkedIn for years. The most recent survey of fully employed people who are over 3 years or more in the workforce, 21% said they were super passive. This is this is U.S., North America. 43% said they were explorers. 13% said they were tiptoers, and 23% said they were very active. This is for everybody on LinkedIn. It's a little bit overstated on active because many people joined LinkedIn in the last year because they're looking for jobs. So I think it's a little distorted. I'll give you another survey, a sub-survey we took of a different group in there in a moment. Regardless, a super passive person, not looking at all, would take an extraordinary move. It takes a lot of recruiting to get the even person to think about that. An explorer, Carol says, yeah, I'm open to talk about it. They want a significant career move. They're not looking. They don't need to look. They're still satisfied. It takes a lot of recruiting to get this person. A tiptoer, if they just started, if they're really good, they can be discriminated. They're not in a hurry. So they're looking for a much better job. And a very good active candidate still wants something better. Yes, they have an economic need, but if they're good, they're not going to just take anything. They'll still want a better job. So if you're going after the top third, recognize you can't offer them lateral transfers. In our sourcing program, performance-based hiring workshop, we basically say use a 40-40-20 sourcing plan. Get people as early as you can in the process. As soon as they're active, get them. As soon as they tiptoe, get them. Explorers aren't looking, but nonetheless, you want to get a good active person on day one or week one. You got to get people, so you got to design your sourcing to get people as soon as possible. The best ones will get picked up quickly. But a 20-40-40 sourcing plan basically says, let's have very compelling ads that people can find. Another 40% or 20% on that. 40% on doing Boolean searching, sending out very compelling targeted emails, and leveraging your employee referral program. LinkedIn Recruiter allows you to do that very efficiently. The other 40% is expand your networking profoundly. Takes a lot. Getting the names is really easy. Recruiting these people, at least to the far left, is a little bit more significant. But that's our program. The idea is when you get a candidate on the phone, wherever this person is, I know that I got to get on a steeper portion of the career zone curve. That's my goal. It's not going to be instantaneous. It takes time for the candidate to realize this. This is what we do is how do you overcome objections? How do you present your job? How do you push the curve here to the left? Now, when we did our sub-surveys of people who are top performers and didn't join LinkedIn just to get another job, only 5% of candidates in the scarcity market were active. They don't need to be. I mean, they're getting referrals all the time. Coworkers are finding them. So there's very few people who are in this scarcity situation. You get a few, but you're not going to get a lot. 20% were tiptoers. Hey, you call them, they were thinking of leaving their job, was a little less satisfied, but because they're good, they're tapping into their network. Another 50% were explorers. They weren't looking at all, but hey, they're pretty open-minded. And 25% were super passive. What I look at the sweet spot for sourcing is this middle piece. Let me get a pen here. This part right here. That's 70% of the market. So if you're just using postings that are boring, you're going after 23% of the market, but for the critical jobs, you're going after less than 5% of the market. I want to go after 70% of the market. It's not that hard to do with good recruiter skills. 25%, that's a hard thing to do. I'm a good recruiter. I tend to charge fees to go after the 25%. It's hard, and it's painstaking. Every dollar I get to hire a super bad I earn my fee 10 times over. It's not easy. It's actually it's not hard to get explorers and tiptoers. If you get enough of them, you can definitely raise the talent bar. So that's what our program is about. But let me kind of just ask you some questions just so you get a sense of sourcing. And how do you define the work? Because I think that's important. Well, first off, let me recognize you have to have a different process to hire the top third. Think about the sourcing funnel. You get a list of names, you go through LinkedIn, you got a pool of candidates, you got a group of followers. If they're really good, you want to convert them into, hey, are these leads and referrals? They're not really candidates yet, they're just names of potential candidates. You got this whole name database, you narrow it down to people who meet your reasonably filters. You talk to these people, hey, Carol, you open to talk about something. Carol, at that point, is a prospect. She's not a candidate. I then have to recruit her. Hey, I've got to convince this person that this really is a great career move before they, yeah, I'm interested. I'll come in. I'm serious now. I'll come in for an interview. Well, that takes a lot of work. And then I got to interview the person. I got to keep them engaged. I got to get them a finalist, and I got to negotiate an offer without not a lot of money in the budget. Well, that's what it's like when you have a passive candidate. The active candidate pool is, hey, post an ad. Hopefully somebody meets all our filters. And it's pretty much a high-tech approach. Hands-off, high-tech, impersonal. To hire someone who's a passive candidate, tiptoer or explorer, referral, high touch, it's got to be, hey, it's got to really see it's a career move. The hiring manager has to be engaged. It's a different process. And unfortunately, most people try it, and in a scarcity situation, we have plenty of candidates, the high-tech approach might work. Demeaning, but impersonal, but it might work. If you're going after the tiptoers and explorers, it will not work. It will backfire. So recognize if you really have in a scarcity situation, the best people are going to have to be recruited. In a surplus situation, which is really what the LinkedIn survey was, you got 23% are active. If you can get a good person in surplus, fine. I still think it's demeaning, but that's neither here nor there. The idea is that performance-based hiring is a passive process, high-touch process. We use LinkedIn Recruiter. We optimize LinkedIn Recruiter. It's a lot of what we do. If you don't have LinkedIn Recruiter, the full gamut, you can still hire passive candidates, but it's not as effective. In my mind, if you're hiring more than 5 to 10 people, an investment in LinkedIn Recruiter is a no-brainer. Under that, who knows? That's a different game. So the idea is it's a different process, different strategy, different understanding, strong recruiters. The next component, however, is you have to have a different job. You have to know the job. So I want to kind of just give you a little background on what we do, and I'll take a real job here, so you'll see in a minute. My first book, Hire With Your Head, came out based on 15 years of recruiting executives. And that was 1997. 1999, the Gallup Group came up with a book, certainly far more successful than my book, but it had a lot of similar themes. What the world's greatest managers do differently. I wrote another book. Well, I had 3 editions of Hire With Your Head, and I decided to do our own book, self-publish it. Well, that's not true. Small publisher, but we got the book published in 2013 and doing extremely well, which is really just an update of Hire With Your Head on how to use performance-based hiring. The themes are constant. The Gallup book, which is 1999, First Break All the Rules, that's where they first developed what's called the Q12. If you've not read the Gallup book, First Break All the Rules, you should read it because it will help you as a recruiter. What Gallup found is if you want to hire great people and be a great manager, the number one thing you have to do to maximize performance and motivation is tell people what they're expected to do. Define the work before you define the person. Give the person the tools to do that work. You can't motivate someone who's not motivated to do the work, so you got to hire people who want to do the work, and you got to develop that person to become better at what they do. That's one of the top 4 of the 12 things that maximize performance and job satisfaction. A couple, 3 years ago, Google came out with their Project Oxygen, which was based on 10 to 12 years of performance reviews of what does it take to be a great manager at Google. Turned out it wasn't technical skills, it was establishing a performance management approach to managing people and developing people. Tell people what they do, give them work they like to do, and help them become better at doing that. Well, I've been doing that, and I don't take any credit for it. I think a lot of people are doing that. If you tell people what they do, I think I learned on my MBA program 25 or 30 years ago. Well, I guess it's more than that. I hate to say that, but it was a lot of years ago. Hey, clarify your expectations and manage people to the expectations. I mean, this is not rocket science, and yet it seemed to take rocket science to prove it. But HR seems to go back to the traditional job description. Let's take a job description and emphasize skills and experiences. Well, here's a typical job description. Strong organizational time management, excellent oral and written, outstanding presentation, ability to interface, ability to multitask, experience, and a dozen requirements of what people need to have. This is not a person, that's not a job description. It's a person description. And if you look at most of the stuff on most job descriptions, they define a person. Well, I tell hiring managers, let's put the person description in the parking lot. What does the person need to do to be in the top third of every person doing this kind of work? Let's define the top third. And let's define it as terms of performance objectives. And I say, let's focus on what the person needs to do and become. Now, I don't necessarily go with my hiring manager and talk about strategy, but it's implied there. That's how I implement the strategy. Focus on what people can do and become. When I talk to hiring manager for this telecommunications job, which is a $150K job for a big company, the real job was the reason you know all the technical skills and all the communication skills. What does that mean? They're dealing with our senior level marketing and sales people and going out and dealing with C-level officers at Fortune 500 companies who are buying anywhere from a $10 million to a $50 million, $100 million infrastructure project. Okay, well that makes sense. If a person can do that work, they obviously have enough good communication skills. So I focus on what they need to do, not what they need to have. What else do they need to do? Why do they have all these technical skills? Oh, because they're the technical guru at all these meetings. Any technical issue, this person has to address it. And they got to get it right. What is this thing about finance and have business acumen and finance? Oh, because they're working with our finance and contracts department, so they've really got to be the person to justify in real time, negotiate the pricing, making sure that we maintain our margins. Okay, got it. Now what is this multitasking? I mean, the teller at Wells Fargo has to multitask. Oh, no. They're handling 3 to 6 major projects with some major companies, and with each project there's 15 or 20 action items. They're going to be on top of that. The people who underperform are just not good at organization. Okay, if I can find someone who can do that work, who might not have exactly the skills listed on the job description, would you at least see the person? Managers, 95%? Of course I would. This is where you have to get the manager to be convinced it's not about skills. I got to get away from the having, focus on the doing. Then when I talk to a candidate, I got to advertise this doing as a compelling career move. When a candidate, if Carol calls me up and says she's open to explore, and she immediately says, what's the compensation? I say to Carol and every other candidate, Carol, it doesn't really matter what the compensation is, at least at this point. If this is not a career move, it doesn't matter what we pay you. You shouldn't take it. Let's first see if it's a career move, then we'll see if the compensation fits. Now, I've delayed by that at least a half hour to get into compensation. I know I've got to talk about it, but I don't want to talk. I want to put that in the park. I want to put the having and the getting in the parking lot for a moment. I want to have a career discussion. And when I talk to the candidate and interview the candidate on the phone screen, I got to make sure, hey, if it's a career move, I'll say, I think it could be a career move, Carol. Here's why. Then I'll get in the conversation. If it's not a career, Carol, it's not a big enough job or it's too big a job, then I can network with the person. But the idea is I have to control the conversation and understand the candidate, because if I just talk about having and getting, candidates will filter themselves out. So this is where the dance takes place, when I take the assignment and when I talk to candidates. Now, to go after the 5% are active, it doesn't matter. To go after the 70% are tiptoers and explorers, it does matter. And to raise the talent bar on a consistent level, in a time-efficient manner, I've got to go after the tiptoers and explorers. And I've got to conduct a pre-hire performance review. Let me very quickly go through this. I'm actually kind of giving you an overview of our whole performance-based hiring. We actually do this in the training. I'm going to go through I want to ask you your opinion on this, so I'm going to do it quickly. Imagine that I ask you on the phone screen, or even on an online interview, or even, online interview, or even a live interview in person. I ask you to tell me about your major accomplishments. In fact, I'll focus on, so think about this from a role play standpoint. Think about the most significant work you've ever done, biggest accomplishment of all time. And if I spend 10 or 15 minutes trying to figure out what that was, and I ask you questions, hey, and I'm going to use Carol only because I picked your name, Carol, so you don't have to actually answer. Hey, JJ, can we mute everybody? It's getting kind of noisy back here.
Yeah, everyone is now muted.
Okay, so let's assume that I talk. Thanks, JJ. So let's assume that, Carol, you don't have to answer this, but let's assume I ask Carol and everyone else here. So just get me your reaction to this after I ask the question. So I spend 10 or 15 minutes, hey, Carol, tell me about your biggest accomplishment. When did you do it? Why were you chosen? Did you volunteer? Did you get assigned? And if you volunteered, why? If you assigned it, why? How did you solve the biggest problem? How did you handle the biggest conflict within that accomplishment? Where did you go the extra mile? Where did you take the initiative? How did you tell me about your biggest decision? Tell me about the plan you put together, how you organized the plan, how you managed the plan. And I spend 15 minutes really digging into this accomplishment. Now, this is, if you want to get a sense of the questions I ask and actually go through it, I wrote a post on LinkedIn called The Most Important Interview Question of All Time. As of today, 1.5 million people have read that posting. This is the question. During our training, recruiters ask that question. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes. In a real interview, you can figure it out in probably 5 or 8 during the phone screen, but the idea is to really understand what the person's major accomplishment was of all time, most significant accomplishment of all time. If you were interviewed that way, what do you think it would reveal? Just put it in there. What would it reveal if I could actually spend 15 minutes with each of you and really tell me exactly what you've accomplished? Yeah, right now. Why don't we
Okay, Lou.
Okay, so yeah, proud of what you enjoyed. Everybody put it in there. What would I learn about you as a person? You know, people do it. My team skills, my tenacity, reveal something. Carol's going to tell me in a moment. Everybody put it in there. And the only reason I want you to put it in there, you get a feeling for the training, because a lot of our training is online where you kind of interact. So passion, how they view themselves, yeah. I mean, really you get everything. Tenacity. Now, which is really, when you think about it, well, it's actually not the skills, but yes, it is the skills and how they use them on the job. So you really get an idea of it. It's actually called the behavioral consistency model. our basic question is, tell me about a major accomplishment. The fact-finding is all behavioral fact-finding. Tell me what, in that accomplishment, we want to tie the behaviors to an accomplishment. It's called the behavioral consistency model. The idea is, by asking that same question multiple times, we start seeing the growth of accomplishments over time. So just that trend line starts describing potential. The size of the projects, the size of the teams, the size of the companies, the scope and the impact. So asking a similar question, even if the behavior's changed. You ask it, where'd you go the extra mile? Where'd you take the initiative? And initially it might have been technical. After a while, Carol's, it might be helping others become better. It might be organizing planning. It might be taking on real projects that she's got confidence. A lot of stuff happens with asking that same question and looking at the pattern over time. Could be individual. We ask this question, job related. Hey, one of the big things we need to do, Carol, is launch a new product. Walk me through where you've done that. Could be, hey, you're going to be managing a team of 5 people. Walk me through your biggest team accomplishment. But the question is basically the same, but we put different prefaces around it. And we start seeing the growth of team accomplishments and growth of individual accomplishments. And I ask candidates, hey, who's on your team? And you start saying, hey, the person's starting to be involved. Number one, bigger teams report to the person, or the person is part of bigger teams, multifunctional teams. You start really, in some ways, it's a forensic interview, meaning, hey, just by asking questions and looking at it, the growth of this, you start seeing a lot of stuff you didn't see. Because part of it is we got to assess this person. To raise quality of hire, I've got to say, hey, can this person, number one, I've defined, remember, my goal here is to raise the talent bar. First I got to figure, what do they have to do to raise the talent bar? So I've asked the manager, tell me what the top third is. And now I got to assess the person. We have a specific scorecard. I'm not going to get into the details of it. We have a specific competency model. Basically says, our company model, which is up here in the upper right, says the person has to have the skills to do the work. I'm not going to get into all the pieces of it. Has to have the skills to do the work, has to fit the situation, and collectively that drives motivation. In fact, I'm doing a post for Inc. magazine next week. It says, how to hire for motivation. Well, you can't hire, because a lot of CEOs want to hire motivated people. Well, give them work that motivates them. You can't take a person unless, there's very few people, I don't know, but anybody here motivated to do any kind of work they've ever been assigned? You can say yes or no. Does anybody give just work because anything they give you, you do it? Yeah. On the other hand, I know people who, hey, certain people are motivated to do work they really like to do. Well, Joanna, you and I need to talk afterwards. If you're motivated to do anything, anytime, we need to chat. But most people are motivated to do work under a certain set of circumstances. So understanding the work is critical. Just because Joanna tells me she's highly motivated doesn't mean, well, maybe Nina says she's highly motivated, doesn't mean she's highly motivated all the time. That's why generic competencies without getting involved in the job are meaningless. Well, that's what our scorecard does. 3 parts to it. What are the skills? Does the person have the achiever pattern, which we get into in the class, but the achiever pattern says, is this person in the top quartile of his or her peer group? Do they have the basic skills to do the job, talent, management skills, team skills, thinking skills, and do they fit the situation? Collectively, that drives motivation. That's how we measure pre-quality of hire for the candidate. We're assessing the person to the job, the top third. To meet the top third requirements of the job, the person has to be above a 3 on all of the categories. Well, average of 3. So we not only define the top third, we actually then measure it during the interview. Level 1 is the bottom third. These are people who will they're not bad people, but they'll represent the bottom third. If you're a 0, you shouldn't get hired. The middle third is people who companies typically hire. The higher the top third is hard. They got to be in the top 20, 25%. Level 4 is the top 10 to 15%. Level 5 is rock star. And this is all in comparison to the job. You cannot do this unless you have a job profile. So we spend a lot of time in our course on filling in this form and sending it to managers. But we've defined the top third as B+ or better. And I ask managers, if a person can do all this work, would you hire them? Yes. That's the goal. So then you have, as a recruiter, you have to demonstrate that the person can do the work. During our interview, we say, don't make a decision for 30 minutes. And if you have 30-minute interviews, you've got to redesign the interview process. A 30-minute interview is a waste of time. We train managers on how to interview. But we discovered if you can be objective for 30 minutes, you can put the candidate into 3 buckets. A level 1 or worse, possibly level 5 or 2, 3, or 4. You can't tell if the person's going to be, hey, person's either going to be average or above average, maybe in the top third. It takes a lot of work to do that. So the other rule about interviewing is no 2s. We spend most of our time making sure the person's not a 2. If they're not a 2, well, then they're a 3, 4, or 5. And a lot of that's variable. Hey, sometimes jobs will be a 3, sometimes it'll be a 5, sometimes the manager will be an idiot, and then a person will be 1. Nonetheless, we want to address all of that. I can't get into any more than that today, other than to say in our class, we spend a lot of time on measuring pre-hire quality of hire, and we compare it to the job. That's how we prove the person's in the top third. Again, remember what we're trying to do here is raise the talent bar, use performance-based hiring to hire the top third, and also demonstrate that there's an ROI impact that's huge. Then people say, well, what's the legal issue? You can't do that. Well, I talked to the number one labor attorney in the country, #1 labor attorney from Littler Mendelsohn. Here's what he said. There's a white paper in the book. If you buy this book, it's Kindle less than $10. I think it's 12 or 13 hard copy. You should get a copy and read it. It will allow you to hire the top third. But he said performance-based job descriptions are more objective than skills-based job descriptions. More objective. You can hire more, and he even said you hire more military candidates, more diverse candidates, because you've taken blinders off. Just the fact that someone says needs 5 years more experience, while that's objective, it might not be accurate. Well, if you've met anybody who can do it with 3 years, well, then it's really a flawed criteria. Even though it's numerically objective, it doesn't mean that it's predictive. So he loved performance-based job descriptions, said everybody should use them. Number 2, focus on what people need to do does open it to minorities and diverse candidates, because minorities and diverse candidates tend to have different experience. High potential candidates. I mean, think about it. High potential candidates, they're high potential because they get more done with less experience. So you get someone who's a 3-year engineer who's doing work at the 6-year level, why would you not want to see that person? Because they don't have enough experience? Because they're better. I mean, it's so illogical to use experience, focus on performance. 3, you don't need to post boring job descriptions. There's no law that says you have to take that job description and post everything that's listed. That became an internet issue in applicant tracking systems, and job boards said that. And all of a sudden that became the default. You can post creative advertising. We do a lot of that. I wrote a post yesterday on LinkedIn, which you might want to check out. It's write magical job posting. I don't think it says, or add the magic to your jobs to hire magical people, something like that. But if you look at LinkedIn Influencer, you'll see that posting. Then the 4, our performance-based interview with that scorecard, he loved it. He said it's objective. He said if you use that, document it, you'll never get a lawsuit ever. He was totally enthusiastic about this process. So let me kind of summarize, then I'm going to go back. Well, does anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions? That's performance-based hiring. I didn't get into much of the recruiting other than there's a lot of issues. Carol says, what's the money? I said, Carol, doesn't matter what we pay you, but there's probably 20 things that candidates say that recruiters need to instantly overcome. I don't like the company. I don't like the location. I don't know. I'm not interested. Whatever a candidate says, we have a rebuttal for it, and we have information to give recruiters in our program. Nonetheless, let me kind of summarize it. I'm going to open it up to questions if you guys have it, and I'll go into the ROI a little bit more just so you can kind of get a sense of it. The focus of our program is to maximize quality of hire using performance-based hiring. It starts by rethinking the strategy. We're in a surplus or scarcity situation. You've got to focus on people do and become. To implement a right-to-left strategy, we attract the best. They're going to largely be passive candidates. We're going to raise the talent bar. To do that, you've got to either lower the water or raise the bridge. It starts by defining the work. Hey, what's this person need to do? Not what they need to have. What does the person need to do to be successful? I will find you that person. If I find someone who can do that work, would you at least see them? Managers, I mean, I didn't say hire the person. I said, would you see him? And managers said, oh, sure I would. I then build my 40-40-20 sourcing plan, recognize I got to go after the 70% in the middle. That's the sweet spot. I'm generally going to get that person through networking or referrals or using LinkedIn Recruiter, Boolean, and very creative emails. We do a lot of work on making sure you can get that middle of 70%. It's a huge market, huge market. That's where you're going to get your best people. To do it, though, you've got to be a pretty good recruiter, which we obviously get into. Then we use our interviewing methodologies. There's actually 2 questions. I just gave you the one, which is dig deep into the person's accomplishments and look at the trend rate over time. But if you do all those things, you actually will hire the top third. Take some work. We have a proof of concept where we work with a few recruiters in a company. They go through our training. We compare their performance before and after. We compare their performance to other recruiters who have not gone through it for the same positions. Time after time after time, the quality, the speed, the productivity is a game changer. So let me just kind of end it here, summarize it and end it, and then we'll talk about ROI or answer any questions you've got. It's an expert system. There's probably other ways to hire the top third, but this is a system for recruiting, for sourcing, for defining the work, for assessing, for hiring great people. That's what performance-based hiring is all about. Starts by thinking backwards, focusing on what people need to do and become. Implementing the two-question performance-based interview. It's easy, but it's powerful. It is a behavioral-based interview, but we really tie the behaviors underneath the accomplishments so we can actually relate the actual job to the actual performance-based, we call it a performance-based job description, so we actually rank the candidate against their ability to do the work and motivation to do the work. The hiring formula, which is basically ability to do the work in relation to the circumstances, drives motivation, and we compare that on an official scorecard to measure pre-quality of hire. That gives us the ROI statistics. Are we hiring better people? Pulling it off, raise the talent bar. We absolutely increase assessment accuracy. There's no question that this is far more accurate than a traditional behavioral interview, and we can measure pre-quality of hire. So just the upcoming things. Our next online program starts October 3rd. We have 4 online modules, and the course itself, 4 components. First one on defining the work, second one on sourcing, third one on interviewing, the fourth one on recruiting. Excuse me. But the big issue is to get certified. It's not just training. We give you a learning center 24/7 for a full year. You have 60 days to get certified in performance-based hiring. To get certified, and not everybody does it, maybe a third of it do it, you have to complete a search doing what we say. Those who get certified clearly are 50 to 100% better. Not even in the game. 100% of the time, those who get certified are better. Not necessarily not everybody can get certified, but it just takes some work, new skills, a lot of it going after passive candidates. But you really learn by going through it. The online training is a classroom. The field work is going out and doing it, and that's what the certification is. You actually have to do the work, not take a test. You actually do the work. We have another training program for managers. They go to the define the job module, and they go to the interviewing module. So we have a compatible program for managers as well. And we let talent leaders, if you are truly a talent leader, you can audit Module 1 on October 3rd. You can get the book, what URL, Essential Guide for Hiring. Let me just see it. I can't see it on my screen. Essential Guide for Hiring, P4, or if you want any information to sign up or gather info at louadlergroup.com. So let me open it up to questions right now, at least a little bit. Then anybody wants to hang in for 5 minutes on the ROI, feel to do it. So let me just ask you this. What is your general feeling? Does performance-based hiring, does it conceptually seem like it's a reasonable process? Just yes or no? Does conceptually, some of you already know about it, so does it seem reasonable? Yeah, we're actually seeing, all of a sudden this last year or so, companies are just realizing, let's get rid of behavioral interviewing, let's introduce you to the performance-based hiring. So we're getting a lot of companies do it. I can see this inflection point. It's taken a lot of years, but I think I've been around a lot of years, as many as you know, it really getting there. And I'm not going to force you to ask you, hey, do you want to go to the training program if you guys decide to do it. We do have a proof of concept, which I think is pretty neat. We're doing this with a lot of companies where we actually, number one, we take a few recruiters through it. It doesn't cost a lot of money to do the proof of concept. A few recruiters through it. We compare their performance before and after. So it's a great way to just taste it. With some companies, when they want to introduce it to the executive team, we also have the performance-based hiring executive search process where me or somebody in the team, we walk step by step through the process on a real search with the executive team to introduce them. If you're already going out to search, our fee is essentially the same. It might even be a little bit lower, but there's no additional fee. But we actually do the search step by step by step. We're totally visible. It's kind of in the lab, and we demonstrate the impact that performance-based hiring can have. That's actually, Matt's a great question. Well, I know we're doing some work with MRI. They want to take a group of their recruiters to do it. I think, well, we have a number of extra staffing firms who send their recruiters through this right away. It will make you better initially right away. So we do have, this is like almost a basic training for staffing firms, and we have a lot of search firms that just do it. They just constantly send their recruiters. But I think if you don't have 6 months experience, probably a little bit too light. But on the other hand, you can come back. You can take it now, and then take it again in 6 months from now. Our program's a full year program, and we have people come back and multiple times as they try it out, so it can take some longer. Hold on one second, guys. I'm going to cough again. Still fighting bronchitis, but neither here nor there. Give me a minute. Give me the name of a job, Carol, just so I see it there. She says, I think you have to have compelling advertising. We spent a lot of time on this in the one program. She says, what's the target market? And in the article I wrote yesterday, Write Magical Job Postings, didn't get, I mean, I thought it was a great post, but certainly didn't get a lot of readers, but neither here nor there. So put in the title of your job, and I'll, but the idea in a generic sense is I asked the hiring manager, why would a top person want this job if he or she wasn't looking and she or she was in the top third and he or she got a counteroffer? So that's the secret. So what are they going to do? So let me kind of go back, and this is a story I'm probably going to, maybe not, but I'm telling you this story, Carol, and everyone else. My first job was a systems engineer. I'm pretty old, guys. Most people my age are retired. I'm not, but that's, and I don't expect to be. But my first job was a systems engineer on a nuclear missile program. It was in Southern California. Minuteman missile, still around today. 22 was pretty cool. However, there's about 30 engineers on the team, and they were 25 to 50 years old. They thought the most boring job in the world. It was 1968, 1969. They had just been transferred from the moon landing program where Rockwell made the lunar module when it landed on the moon. They built that. So all these engineers were building that. They thought exactly the same work, but they were building the project. So one secret I give you, and they all said, we were 24/7. They couldn't ever leave. Here they'd leave 8 hours and 15 minutes and they were gone. And motivation was driven by two things, maybe three things. Certainly the work itself, do they like that work? And they liked the work, but the project was boring. Moon landing was something, it was a mission. So if you can tie it to the strategy, to a mission, the work itself, you can hire some pretty magical people. So that was really the essence of the article. So I asked the employee value proposition, why would a top person take this job? Can you tie it to something bigger than the job itself? So, and we get into that in Module 2 extensively. It's probably one of the most important modules in the program. So let me kind of just say the top 30 again. When you think about the statistics, and we can do this with anybody. If you're just interested, if you just want to talk about it, we can set a meeting up, but we got to look at some financial statements. If you're hiring 100 people, if you're hiring 10 people, you still could do it, but it's 10 times 100,000 is $1 million. What does it cost to hire? Probably you don't even need one recruiter. One recruiter could easily handle 10 assignments in a year. So I'm going to tend for a recruiter to hire 10 better people in a year. Well, if you're working 30 recs, you can't do it. So you probably need 2 recruiters to do it. So you got to hire 1 extra recruiter and send them to a $1,000 workshop. So you're talking about, so the cost per hire is probably going to double your cost per hire, but you'll triple the quality of hire. I don't want to get into the ROI quite yet, but this is our proof of concept to validate the fact using your company's information in a small laboratory. Hey, let's handle 3 or 4 or 5 positions and demonstrate how you can hire extra people. Then let's figure out, hey, what would it cost to scale this out to the whole company on an ROI basis? The cost will probably increase, the cost per hire will increase a little bit, but the quality will more than offset it. And that thinking is what's required. It's almost you need to prove it. I'm not going to dig into any more details on that, but you got the essence of where we're going here. To me, it's critical, it's strategic, it's changing the process, changing the quality of the recruiter, getting trained recruiters, and I'm going to contend that when a recruiter is focusing on quality of hire, it changes the role of the recruiter to the most important person in the company. If you're just filling jobs just like they've always filled, it's a boring job, guys. I mean, I think you owe it to yourself, and if you're a talent leader, to say, hey, our recruiters are important. Let's make our recruiters strategic. That drives their passion, their motivation. They see the job as critical. That's what performance-based hiring is all about. Making sure that understanding and hiring the best is a critical strategic decision for every company, and a recruiter has to be the one to drive it. Any thoughts or questions? Happy to chat. Hopefully this was helpful, guys. Hopefully we see you at our workshop. Good luck, everybody. Thank you. I guess we don't have any questions, do we, JJ?
I don't see any yet. If you have any questions, go ahead and let us know in the chat area. We'll hang on for a few more minutes.
Hey, JJ, when you get this, obviously, send me the recording because I want to put this up on a post.
Will do. All right. I don't see any questions coming in.
Okay. I'll off. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you, everyone.